So let's go ahead and create a permissions model. So let's just say touch internal permissions that go. All right, so we're gonna have that. Let me copy this because we want to use this as the file name. So we have data and we will have permissions. Okay, so we have file name. Okay, save that. Yep, that's true. We will fix that. Packages, so let's just say package data. And we have a couple of imports, so we will have, of course, we need context. That's a given. And we will need our SQL, so database. And of course, we will need time. Okay, so let's just go ahead and define a slice to hold the permissions. Okay, the permission codes. So to make this easier for us and to be able to write methods, we'll just create a new type, and this type will be called permissions. Okay, and the underlying type is a slice of string. Okay, so now I can just go ahead and I could just create a method. So let's create a method that checks the slice for a specific permission code. Okay, and that's rather straightforward. We'll just say p of type permissions, and we'll call our method include, and of course we'll simply pass in the code that we are looking for, and we will return a bool, true or false, to signify that yes or no we found the code in the user's slice. So let's just loop through the slice. So for I colon range p, okay, then we'll simply check to see if code is what we're currently looking at, and if it is, then we will simply return true. Right? Otherwise, if we exit the for loop, then we know we did not find it, and so we will return false. Okay, that's straightforward. All right. Now let's move on, and we will need to now create the model, the permission model, that will allow us to interact with the database table. So we've done this many times, so we'll create a model named permission model. Okay, and of course it's a struct, and it will accept, by now you should know, a database connection, no? Database connection, sql.db, and that's it. That's all we need to create our permission model. So now we can go ahead and write methods that access our table, our database, based on the permission model. So let's just do that. So func m, of course, of type permission model. And so we will create a method called get all for user. So if we provide a user ID, okay, then this method should return a slice of the permission codes. So that will be permissions, right? Remember our permissions type up here. So it will return a permissions, which is just a fancy way of saying a slice of strings, and that slice contains the codes, and of course an error. So let's write the code for this method, which by now you should know is starts off with our query. And so what will our query do? Well, our query must join the tables to ask the question. Okay, so I will simply write a join. Again, you should know what a join is. So I will say select permissions. Okay, permissions dot code from the permissions table, of course. From permissions. Okay, and now we'll do an inner join. Okay, again, something you should know about. And we're gonna join that with the users underscore permissions. Okay, because remember, this user's permissions table contains for each user their list of permissions. Okay, and of course we need to specify how we'll join these two tables, and so we'll say on users underscore permissions dot permission ID, okay, is the same as permissions dot ID. Okay, now we're not done yet. We now want to join the two tables, which is permissions and users permissions, to the users table. So if you recall earlier, I talked about having to join three of them so we can read across all three of them. And so we've joined the first two, and let's join the third one, the users. And that's simple enough. We'll just keep going. So inner join users, and so now I simply need to specify how we will join users. Well, it will be on users underscore ID. Well, I guess we'll put permissions first. Okay, so let's do that first. Users underscore permissions, okay, is the same as, sorry, dot ID, user underscore ID, is the same as the users table ID. Okay, so permissions joined with users permissions, permission ID, permissions.id. Now I'm going to join those two tables with users. And so since we are using the last one, right, to continue the chain, then user permissions, that user ID will be used to join users.id. Okay, so I hope that wasn't too difficult since you have done joins quite a bit. And so let's just proceed. And so finally, we'll now say what is the condition. So where users.id is what is asked, $1. Okay, that's what will be provided here. And so once we run this query, we should be able to get all permission codes that this user has. All right, and that's it. That's our query. Well, once we have our query, we now need to prepare it to be run. So let's run. We're going to use a context, of course, and create our cancel function. And so we will say context with timeout. All right, so of course we're going to say context that background, and we're going to have the time be 3 seconds as we have done in previous queries. Okay. All right, that's straightforward, nothing new there. And then we'll just defer the running of cancel. And then of course we will now check for the actual values that are returned. So let's run the query. So let's just say m.db that, and we're going to say query context. And we will pass in, what must we pass in? A context and the query parameters. And what will be returned? Pointer to the rows return along with an error. Okay, so we have the context, that's ctx. And then of course we need to provide the query. And finally we need to provide any arguments, which we only have one, which is user ID. That's all we need for $1. Great, so now let's go ahead and iterate over the rows return, if there are any. So if error not nil, then we know that we were not successful. So we will return nil to signify no rows, and of course an error. So assuming that there were rows, all right, or in our case, yeah, let's just defer rows that close, because we must close this pointer to rows before we leave our get all for users method. All right, so how do we iterate over the rows? Well, we've done this many times, but all we have to do is create a variable. Okay, so we're going to create a permissions variable of type permissions. So permissions is simply a slice. All right, and we'll put in all the codes into the permissions slice. Okay, so let's iterate over the rows. So for rows that next, what I want to do is to grab one of the codes. So let's create a variable called permission. Okay, single permission of type string. And that will hold the first code. Okay, and so we're going to say error is assigned. Then we're going to say rows that scan. Okay, and of course we need to pass in the address of permission. Okay, so if error not nil, then we know something went wrong, and we'll just return nil, and then we'll return error. Okay, now assuming that there are no errors, then we know that we have some data, and so we're going to append that data to our permissions slice. And we've done that many times before, so we'll say permissions is append permissions. I'm going to add the string permission. All right, nothing new here. Nothing new here. And we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep doing that, iterating over all the rows, and we're going to grab the rows return, which, if you notice, there's only one column return, right? A column that contains as many rows as the user has codes. So if the user has 2 codes, read and write, that will be 2 rows returned. 1 column, 2 rows. And so we're going to iterate. Okay, we're going to grab that first row, and we're going to put that into the permissions table, and then grab the second one, put that into the permissions table, and then we're done with all the rows. Now once we exit successfully, then we need to do one final check just to make sure that the rows object does not have any errors. And so we say if error, all right, we're going to call rows.error. Okay, if this returns anything, so right, so error returns error, if any, that was encountered during iteration, during this iteration. So we call it, assign it to error, and then I'm going to check error not nil. Then during the iteration, something went wrong, and so we will return nil and also error. Now, if there were no errors set, then it means that we successfully got our codes for that particular user. And so we'll return the slice where those codes were put, which is permissions, right? Remember permissions, it's a slice, right? And then of course we'll need to return an error, which there will be none, so we'll return nil. Okay, so that's our permissions model. Okay, so let's save that. And before we wrap up, let's just add this to our models. So go here, right? So remember, every model we create, we gonna add it to this entry. So let's say we did schools. Let's put permissions. Yeah. Let's just put permissions. Well, let's put permissions first. Let's keep alphabetical order. So permissions, okay, of type permission model. Okay, and let's just put that here as well. Let's just say permissions, and it will be initialized with permission model, which we'll pass in the DB that was provided to us. Okay, and so we have our models all set, and we will leave it right here. Okay, I'll see you in the next video. In the next video, we will just go ahead and we will actually write the middleware that we need to actually implement the permissions. All right, I'll see you in that video.